All right, we're going to talk about texture. So, texture is how things feel or look as if they might feel if touched. So, I have a photograph here. This guy has these burlap bags. And if you look real close at a burlap bag, this would be the texture. And your book talked about how, like, this burlap would not be a good texture for clothes because that just, when you look close at the fabric, that does not look comfortable for fabric. It feels like it'd be quite itchy as well. And your book talks about how little children, when they're little babies, they explore the world. If you ever notice, they put a lot of things in their mouth because they're exploring the world through texture as well. They're feeling the things that they're holding, and the tongue is a very sensitive uh, organ, and it detects textures, and so that's why they put so many things in their mouth. And then you can see like the texture here. You can look at the fur of the kitty and then also the fur of the blanket. It looks, it looks like you would want to like, touch that because everything in this picture is very soft. And then we have the texture that's on this lizard. By the way, it's an AI image, and they've heightened the image of the texture, but it's texture nonetheless. So your book talks about actual textures, the texture that you actually feel. And then and this Degas sculpture, he made it out of bronze, but he didn't make the ribbon that's in her hair or the dress that she's wearing out of bronze. The ribbon is an actual ribbon and the dress is an actual dress. So this sculpture, this bronze sculpture, has multiple textures in it. And it was one of the first times in history, in art history, where an artist has used multiple textures in the sculpture to represent other things. And then if you look at if you get a close up of Michelangelo's Pietà, you can see the very smooth texture that is on the skin of this. And then there's the actual texture of the monogram by Rauschenberg. It's a taxidermied goat that has actual like rough hair texture. There's the texture that's on the horns. There's the texture that's on the car tire, and then the actual texture of this Oppenheim sculpture, where she wrapped this teacup, spoon, and saucer with fur, so it has the fur texture. And it brings to mind, like, if you were to put that spoon in your mouth or bring the cup up to your mouth, how strange and weird that would feel. This Bernini sculpture has, the simulated texture of the bark, and then the smoothness of the skin. So you can see the two textures are right next to each other that create a contrast. So, and then visual texture is the illusion of a three-dimensional surface. All right, so I guess that is a typo that I need to fix. The illusion of a three-dimensional surface. So this photograph of the bricks looks like, if I were to touch it right now, it would feel like bricks. But actually, if I actually did touch it, in fact, when I do, yeah, so that just when I touched it, it was just, I felt like the computer screen. It did not feel like bricks. So that's a visual texture. Looks like it would feel like bricks, but it doesn't actually feel like bricks. And so here's an artist that uses that visual texture. He imitates the real texture. So you can see the texture of the skin, but you can also see this texture of the rope and the texture of the hair when he draws with this blue ballpoint pen. And then you can see the simulated the texture, or the simulated visual texture on the fur of this. This is not a photograph of a cat, it's a photograph of a drawing of a cat. And so this artist used uh, uh, colored pencils to make the fur look like texture. So in art, we can see that simulated visual texture. In this painting, her dress looks like silk. It looks like if I touched the painting, it would feel like a silk dress. And Anga or Aang, he uses also the textures of dresses, so it looks like silk. It looks like the actual fabric that they are made out of. He's very good with these visual textures, and then you can even see the texture on the yellow gold chair. The fabric there looks like if I tried to touch it, it would feel like that chair. He's very good with textures. Durr also did amazing textures with his drawings and paintings of animals. Caravaggio, you can see the painting or the texture that's on the leaves, on the fruit, on the basket. Really incredible visual simulated texture. Van Eyck does the texture of the gold and the gems. Courbet, you can feel the texture of the rocks and the clothes. I don't mean that you can feel the texture, but it seems like you would feel the texture. Akins, you can see the texture on the rocks. Homer, the texture of the grass. Estes, the texture of the smooth telephone booths that are like chrome and metal. Campion, you can see, if you get it close in, you can see the texture of the leaves and the grass. And that's not Degas, but Wyeth is really good about doing grass texture, hair texture, fur texture, and even the texture that's in that sweater. That's not Degas, that is Boucher. You can see the texture in the smooth skin and the lace, and even in the hair. And the book talks about the invented visual texture, this texture that is made up by the artist, that is not it's not a real texture. So Ernst is really good with making this simulated and invented visual texture. Czech Close does an invented texture. Bernini, that's not the texture of tree bark. It doesn't quite look like tree bark, but it's meant to feel like that tree bark. Watteau, if you look at the texture up in the leaves, up in the trees, that's an invented texture. Your book defines rough texture as it reflects light unevenly and in regular patterns of light and dark. And so you can see that rough texture in the Courbet painting and the Akins painting. And your book defines a smooth texture as it reflects light evenly. And you can really see that in the Flack paintings that she does. It has a lot of the stuff that she has is a very smooth texture. And your book defines the difference between matte and shiny. Matte is when it's like it's almost like a very smooth sandpaper surface where it's not shiny. It doesn't have that glossy shine to it. So here's both the same car, this Audi, and one is matte and one is shiny, and you can see the difference. And then the book talked about the texture of the skin on her face. It's and you can see the difference of the texture of her skin and the difference of the texture of the background. The background has such a rough texture and she has such a smooth texture. And your book compared that to this Albright painting of the picture of Dorian Gray, where the texture on his skin is quite horrific. And then your book talked about actual texture on the canvas. Van Gogh, that's not Degas, it's Van Gogh, used actual texture in his Starry Night to make it kind of jump out from the canvas. And Jasper Johns used encaustic, which is like a melted wax, and that create a really intense invented texture and the actual texture on the picture. All right, that'll be it for texture.